So I just bought a brand new iPhone 14 Pro 2 months ago, knowing that there was supposed to be a new iPhone coming out in the fall. And my concern was that I was going to miss out on a whole bunch of technology and a whole bunch of video features, which was my main goal to get the iPhone 14 Pro. But I'm here to tell you, if you made that same decision, trust me, you didn't miss much. Let me explain why. So to get all the specs out of the way for the baseline models, because we're going to be focusing on the Pros right now, let me just read through the quick list of where all the specs stand and what you can expect in the baseline iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Plus. So we're starting off, these phones are getting the dynamic island. I love it. It's one of my favorite features on the iPhone 14. The brightness is going to go up a little bit more with peak HDR brightness at 1600 nits and outdoor brightness peaking at 2000 nits. More rounded edges on both the Pros and the baseline models. I think people had a little bit of issues with these sharp edges on the 12, 13, and 14 models. I personally like it, but I think, 80% of us plus are just going to throw this phone in a case and we'll be grabbing whatever the case has to offer. If it's a sharp edge, rounded edge, whatever it may be. I think most phones are going in the case regardless, so it doesn't really matter to me. They're using 75% recycled aluminum and 100% recycled copper foil and cobalt. Big thing for Apple this event was trying to be environmentally friendly. They did a whole skit there. Thought it was kind of funny. Props for you, Apple. I can't really speak on it because I don't really know what they're actually doing. I'll believe it when I see it. That's all I'm going to say for that. 48 megapixel main sensor on the camera. Great photos. 2x optical zoom. I think it's going to be good having these better camera options on the baseline models. I'm all for it. I think you can film 4K cinematic mode, which is really cool. I think a lot of people are going to play with, especially uploading videos to social media and stuff along those lines. An option you have now for all the iPhones is to have a voice isolation mode when you're calling somebody. So let's say you're in a large crowded area, it's really noisy, there's lots of background noise. You can swap over to voice isolation mode. I don't know how much it's going to process your voice or what it's going to sound like, but good if you live in a city. And all these phones are getting USB-C for faster data, charging, a whole bunch of other things. I think we all know it has to do with the EU pushing new laws for new charging ports. That's the one grievance I have about my iPhone 14 Pro, is it takes a lot to get footage off of this thing because Lightning is just, and now getting into the Pro models, the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which are pretty much the same thing, except for one feature. All these phones are going to have a titanium case, grade 5 titanium. The Mars rover uses this type of titanium. Lots of T words, oh my gosh. My assumption is it's going to be really light. This phone, although great, is a little heavy. I especially notice it when I pick up like an old iPhone 12 and then I grab my 14 Pro, I'm like, oh, this thing is like twice the weight, it's insane. And one thing they've done with the Pro models is take away the mute button. It is now an action button. We all kind of assumed this. So if you want to launch voice memos, if you want to launch into the camera settings, you can just do that instantly, but you can still put your phone on mute or silent or whatever mode you want. Just, it's a little bit different. I think you just hold down the action button now rather than physically swapping it over, which is cool. I'm all for an action button. In regards to video recording and video quality on the iPhone 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max, for a second, we're just gonna group these two things together because there is one difference, but for now, we're just going to group them together. The only real difference is now is that ProRes films in a log format. You can record to an external hard drive, and you can now do 4K 60 in ProRes format. Up to the iPhone 14 Pro, you can only do ProRes at 4K 30, which was fine, which wasn't really a big deal for me when I heard it, because when I film something in slow-mo, it's usually at 120 or 240. I can just film 4K 60 as is right now. It's just not in the ProRes format. Where these features are going to be beneficial to you is if for some reason you want to film a movie on your iPhone, which I think people might start to do. This is going to work extremely well if you want to film maybe a podcast setting, because you can get an external hard drive that you can film to, because if you're filming ProRes on an iPhone, my iPhone, the 256 gigabyte version, fills up in like 20 minutes, like 22 minutes max. That's not a lot of footage, especially if you're doing a podcast. The great thing that this new iPhone has is a large focal length, so it's a 5x zoom. So we start off at a focal length of 13 and go all the way up to 120. Pretty cool, sounds pretty amazing. For me, I'll never use that. Just zoom in on a camera lens like this Sony or this Canon right here. Either or, that's usually what I'm gonna go with. I don't film a lot of things on the iPhone. The only things that I really film on the iPhone are outdoors. So basically, if you haven't upgraded your phone in a while, the baseline iPhone 15s are gonna be a great option for you. I'm sure you can probably get them in a whole bunch of deals through your providers. So if you have that option, I'd recommend you take it. If you just bought the iPhone 13 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro, is there a need for you to upgrade? Unless your workflow requires 3D video in the future, which for 99.9% of people, I doubt it does, there's no real need to upgrade. Unless if you're somebody who wants that best of the best, it's really not gonna be worth it. I love my iPhone 14 Pro, which is, this is filming off of right now. But if you have the iPhone 13 Pro or the 14 Pro or maybe even the 12 Pro, there's really no need for you to upgrade to this 15 Pro. The only upgrade I would make is to the 15 Pro Max. For anybody who's curious, I'm going to be putting this iPhone 14 Pro through a whole bunch of camera tests against other cameras, against just is this viable enough to make a whole YouTube channel off of. That'll be in the near future, but let's get back to the studio where I'll give my final thoughts on all these new iPhones. So for me personally, little let down, but I'm a little relieved that I didn't spend all this money on the iPhone 14 Pro for no reason. I was expecting that fourth camera in there. Don't know exactly what I thought it was going to be, but that's what we were looking for. But I've been disappointed a little bit by Apple recently. I think this whole thing with the iPhone is they've really updated the cameras last year on the 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, and now they're really trying to fine tune the software and the codecs and all of that on this generation of iPhone. Maybe the iPhone 16 is going to be where we get the crazy 8K camera, because that's what I was hoping for, but we did not get it. But the one crazy thing that we did get, which we can't use now and we won't be able to use for 2023, is spatial video. I don't know if you guys remember from WWDC earlier on this year, Apple talked about how their Vision Pro was going to be able to play back spatial video. And essentially what that was a 3D video. And I think that's absolutely incredible. And this new iPhone is supposedly going to be able to film that 3D video format, just not now. It'll be in the future, and you won't be able to watch that video format because the product to do so isn't available yet and won't ship until early next year. Supposedly. So lots of gray area, but there is that hidden gem in there that this iPhone is going to supposedly be able to film 3D video that you can see on their $3,500 VR headset that doesn't exist yet. They didn't really talk about it enough for me to really feel comfortable about it, but they highlighted it a good amount, and cool, I'm good with it. Excited to see it in the future. The quicker that I can get to the camera, the happier that I am. And we're all good there. And that is the recap of the iPhone 15 lineup. I'm not super upset that I got this iPhone 14 Pro, but I am very curious to see what the new codecs and what the new spatial video, all that stuff is going to look like moving forwards. But everybody let me know what you wish you could have seen on this new generation of iPhones, what you're happy Apple came out with, and what you're expecting on this next one now that we know what's on the iPhone 15s. But with all that being said, subscribe, like, and we'll see you next time.